Now, for more on the increasing cost of raising children in China, I'm joined by Dan Ye, CEO and co-founder of CollegeNode. Welcome to the show.
How are you, Rachelle?
So this is an interesting phenomenon. You have more Chinese joining the middle class. You have the one-child policy done away with, yet people really don't seem to be encouraged to have more children. What's happening there?
Well, these days having kids are very expensive. You don't just want to have kids. You want to have kids who can receive the top of the line education. You want to have kids who can, get married. You want to have kids who can become the best of the best. And it is estimated that in a city like Shanghai, raising a kid from, infant to 18-year-old will cost close to 200,000 US. And that's a lot of money. So for a lot of Chinese families, especially those in big cities, the calculus has been that I would rather have one child, but very successfully, rather than have two, which I can't, provide the best for.
And it's interesting because there have been some cultural changes. I mean, it used to be that it was a lot of multi-generational families living in one house, so that the grandparents would help out. But talk about some of the cultural changes that are also impacting what we're seeing with birth rates.
So the parent these days are the first generation of the only child policy, people in their late 20s and mid to late 30s range. And for these child, they have no brothers and sisters, and therefore it is the norm to have an only child. And so for this group of, I would say, millennials in China, they don't actually see the need to have a second kid if they could not feed them. So that's one of the cultural shift which contributed to the crash of fertility rate in China.
And obviously the drop in fertility rates is something we're seeing on every continent except Africa. But are there any sort of specific concerns to China that younger people have now about deciding whether to have children?
Well, a crash in fertility is always a problem because you need the future generation to pay into Social Security, to work, to be a tax base for the aging generation now. So this is not a problem only China is struggling with. Russia has even lower fertility rate compared to China, and the government are trying everything they could to encourage families to have more kids. Germany, France, even the United States. If it weren't for immigration, the United States would have negative population growth, which would wreak havoc on our Social Security and our tax base. So one thing China could potentially look at is immigration as a source to replenish its population.
Because a lot of parents are wondering about, they have the initiative and it's now trying to look at children age 3 and under, because a lot of people are saying they just can't find nannies, they can't find the care. Talk a bit about the sort of ecosystem that's really needed to support working parents.
Well, so what a lot of the parents do these days is to have their parents, the grandparents, to look after the newborn while both the mom and dad work full time. But it is very taxing on the parent to work full time. And that's also a huge factor contributing not having a second child. I think a month ago we talked about the 996 schedule. So if you work 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week, it is very difficult to have a child, let alone a second child. So it's very understandable.
And are you seeing any major differences between some of these tier 1 cities versus, say, rural or lower tier cities in terms of how they're adapting to childcare and life as a modern parent?
So if you look at the past 20 or 30 years, in tier 1 city has predominantly, couples have only one child, where in the countryside, couple are having two. However, we're seeing this crash in fertility rate among the countryside folks as well. And I think there are many reasons. One of the reasons, obviously, is the increasing cost of childcare. But another less talked about reason is that women are being more educated. Educated women tend to have fewer babies. There are greater ways to entertain ourselves these days. You can watch movies on cell phones. There's been a very famous Brazilian study in the 1960s in which in Brazil, television penetration happened by province. And once television was introduced into our province, fertility rate crashed by 40% because women are busy watching TV than making babies. So one of the reasons that you're seeing a crash in rural fertility rate partially is the increasing penetration of internet in which people have new ways to entertain themselves.
Certainly one way to put it. Well, thank you so much, Daniel Ye, the CEO and co-founder of CollegeNode.